Welcome back to another episode of Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. If you're new here, make sure you hit that like, man. Make sure you're new to this video, hit the like, man, and subscribe, and because we got more videos coming your way. But let's jump right into it. There's a lot of talk going on in the internet world about Tracee Ellis Ross and basically her interview with Michelle Obama on her new podcast. I never really got a chance to look at the entire podcast or listen to the entire podcast, but from a lot of the highlight reels that have been circulating across the internet, Tracee Ellis Ross has gone viral this week saying that she dates younger men because she thinks older men in her age category are toxic masculinity. Now, let me break this down because often I've heard this toxic masculinity being thrown around for the last, I would say, maybe about 5 years. Started hearing the word toxic masculinity probably as a buzzword in 2020. But when I hear somebody like Tracee Ellis Ross bring out this whole thing about toxic masculinity, why is it that we never talk about toxic femininity? Because in certain essences, the pendulum swings both ways. And I don't know what it is with these female podcasters that are cropping up in the space, and it's like it's gotten to a point where both genders kind of live in a vacuum now since social media has existed. And with the manosphere, and I'm going to make a separate video on the manosphere later on. I'm going to talk about that later. But the issue with me is what I'm seeing that's become the probably the basis for why the manosphere exists in the first place. And that is when we start hearing these buzzwords about toxic masculinity and how we perceive masculinity in the United States. What you call toxic masculinity back then, we didn't use the word toxic masculinity. We used the old word. The old word was called macho. So in in Latin America they call it machismo, right? So machismo and then macho, and now the new word is toxic masculinity. So the mere existence of a man is toxic. How did this come about? And this is what I'm trying to bring back to you. I want y'all to listen for a minute before you click off, because I feel like this is an important conversation that we all need to have in this space. The issue of how women have labeled a whole group of men toxic because of traditional ideals of manhood. There's a double standard going about, and we don't want to talk about it in the media. We don't want to talk about it in the mainstream. But My last video, I talked about why black men don't go to college. I talked about the reasons why black men are withdrawn from college. And I also broke down how colleges have become very anti male because of the programs that they have on campus are very female centered and are very woman centered. When we hear these words, we're hearing younger people in their 20s, in their teens, talking about how toxic masculinity is. When we use words like that to label a whole group of boys toxic, like if you have a son, imagine your son being looked at as being toxic because he exists as a boy. Oh, you're toxic because you were born a boy, so therefore you dominate. Therefore you uh you rape women. You're a sexual harasser. And these things have been coming up all over the place, and it's not like feminists don't push these types of ideologies. And when we talk about radical feminism versus traditional feminism, the traditional feminism wants to attack the issue of sexism and misogyny, whereas though radical feminism wants to attack the existence of masculinity and eliminate and decenter maleness. And this is what is troubling about that situation is that when you have people who grew up privileged, like Tracee Ellis Ross, when you have people like Michelle Obama talking about these things and she doesn't have a son. I mean, think about it for a minute. Michelle Obama does not have a son. She has a brother, but she doesn't have a son. Tracee Ellis Ross has no children, but seemingly says that a whole group of men in her age category are toxic. But she never really gives specifics about the toxicity. It's just that she doesn't want to date men who are quote unquote traditional. And that's what I got from the video snippets of what I heard her say. Now, what she just said, that's gonna be really a trickle down effect for life because she put it out there. But somebody like Tracee Ellis Ross, who grew up with a famous mother, who went to a elite college, and now is in her 50s and couldn't find no eligible bachelor in any of the places that she has frequented people, and I know there must have been men lined up wanting to be with Tracee Ellis Ross. Hell, I thought she was beautiful back then. I used to love watching Girlfriends. You know, but we have to come to the terms that when people say stuff like this, you got to look at their background. She grew up privileged. She might have traveled all over the world. She might have done a lot of things, and she's grieving the reason why she can't have children or she can't have the family that she truly wants. But at the same time, she's taken her world experience and her idealism about life and try to push it onto the world and push it on to people like us. What I'm so sick and tired of is these people that have so much privilege, so much class, try to dictate to those who don't have the privilege, don't have the access that they have, to try and dictate to you how to live your life. You know, and I get sick of the Obamas. I get sick of the Tracee Ellis Russell. I get sick of Hollywood and the Hollywood elites putting out harmful messaging that could reach our kids, that could reach the average working person. Because let's be honest here. You know, Tracee Ellis Ross doesn't have to, you know, work at McDonald's. She doesn't have to work at these exuberant these places where we have to serve food or we have to clean or mop floors and shit like that. She is a Hollywood elite. And the one reason why so many people got tired of the Democratic Party, why people turned away from the Democratic Party, is because people like Michelle Obama and Tracee Ellis Ross, these celebrities, the celebrities, you know, celebrity elites trying to dictate from their worldview how life should look. And because they're passing down this harmful messaging, now you got younger people trying to embrace that messaging and also thus ruining their own lives the same way these Hollywood elites try to ruin your life. And it's troubling. There's a double standard with people. Let me just say it outright. There's a double standard with women right now in these spaces. They don't want to address it. They don't want to talk about it on TV. You got female elites like The View, like Gail King, all these people. They hold up these double standards about femininity as if femininity has always been good, as if femininity has always not been toxic. Like, oh, we need femininity in the world. But yet, under the same breath, like I said in my previous video, they put out these articles about why black men aren't going to college. Why aren't men period going to college? Because there's an overly dominance of women trying to really take over. They're trying to push men out of these spaces. I need you to listen before you click off. They're trying to push socially, they're trying to socially engineer gender in terms of pushing men out of the workplace, out of the school system, out of really the entire spectrum of us being the traditional masculine men that we are. And they're trying to replace it with an ideology of female dominance. These podcasts don't exist for nothing. But Tracee Ellis Ross is a symptom of a bigger problem that's going on in the United States. If you put your if you put your head in the sand and you bury it and you don't talk about the problem and address the problem, it's going to keep existing, and it has existed for a while now. If you have sons, and a lot of women do have sons, but truly don't really care for their sons, they would much rather have their sons be crippled, be a handicap, rather than be ambitious. And this is why I've said about a lot of the women right now, they're raising their sons to be really really emotional handicaps for women, because they don't want them to be masculine men. They don't want them. That's why they're taking trades out of schools. That's why they removed the trades. They were, most men in my generation, we don't know how to fix anything. We don't know how to do certain basic things. When, you put stuff like this out into the open, then it becomes problematic. And this is why I say, like, people in these high positions, they have so much power and so much influence over social media, that they could say one thing and then it just trickles down. And when we talk about toxic masculinity, why is it that there's no why is it there's no questioning of toxic femininity? How a lot of these women, how you're seeing on social media, women now being locked up for check fraud, for stealing, shoplifting, for uh, stealing money from their employers. If masculinity was so toxic, then why are we seeing more women get locked up for stuff that really we would expect a man to get locked up for? We're seeing women go to jail for toxic, for check fraud. You look up the videos. You look up the videos and you'll see what I'm saying. We're seeing women get locked up for check fraud, for shoplifting, and yet nobody wants to say anything about it. And yet we're seeing women go to jail for having sex with their students. We're seeing teachers, female teachers, being locked up for having sex with their students. That's become an increasing thing, but you don't hear Me Too talking about this shit. You don't hear the women on the View talking about this shit. How it's become really more and more women doing sexually inappropriate things with minors. They like to talk about how toxic the passport bros are, but you never hear about the women that are going to Jamaica to fuck men, or women going to Kenya to get young African boys to fuck them. You don't hear about these stories, but you hear more and more about men being toxic, men in these settings being being like it's a boys club type of thing. You know, they want to talk about how bad Joe Rogan is, or how bad, these manosphere things are, but they never talk about how bad the women are. Tracee Ellis Ross is a symptom of a bigger problem that's going on in the United States with women. And I'm telling you, it's only the tip of the iceberg. So I need y'all to pay attention. I need y'all to really think. These women have promoted an ideology and pushed an ideology and overplayed their hand so much that they're now in their 50s with no children, and now they're trying to propagate this shit on the younger women. I'm going to do a part two on this, so, and break this shit down. I need you to stay tuned, because Media Talks TV, we're going to break this shit down. So tune in next week for part two. I'm out. Peace.